Shalom, everyone. My name is George Whitten, the founder and director of Worthy News. It is Thursday, November 28th, 2024. It's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The title of this episode is The Sanhedrin Calls Jews Home to Israel, Antisemitism on the Rise. So we got a lot to cover. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, please do. We're going to go right into it, but before I get into it, I do want to talk a little bit about this ceasefire agreement that we talked about a little bit yesterday in the Worthy Wrap. So part of the ceasefire agreement was in correlation with the United States freeing an arms shipment. And so as soon as the agreement signed, an arms shipment has been released. $680 million in arms are going to Israel. And so the ceasefire is set to expire on January 25th, 26th, and Trump comes in office January 20th. So these ceasefires are going to end basically the same time that Trump comes in office, and we'll see what happens. But within today's news, there was actually a very interesting development. Israel 12, Channel 12 News reported that there was a secret Iranian clause within the ceasefire agreement. And basically, it's a commitment by the United States to make sure that Iran doesn't establish a foothold any longer inside of Lebanon. It also goes ahead and says if Israel retaliates, that they're going to go ahead and tell the United States before they do any action inside of Lebanon dealing with Iranian proxies. But the bigger thing is now the United States is going to be the policeman, so to speak, the watchdog of making sure that Hezbollah doesn't establish a foothold. So there's some things coming out. We'll find out a little bit more later on. But before I jump into today's episode, I do want to kind of go through what's happening spiritually. Because unless you understand the spiritual dynamics, you're not going to understand everything that's happening right now in the Middle East. This is actually a passage in Daniel. And Daniel is praying before God, and he's seeking God's face. And there is a battle in the heavens. When Paul discusses in Ephesians 6 that there's, we worry not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and, rulers of darkness. The only place that we actually see a war in the heavens is here, in this passage in Daniel. In this passage in Daniel, the angel is trying to give the answer to Daniel, to give the answer to Daniel's prayer. But there's a battle in the heavens for 21 days. It happens in the kingdom of Persia. Well, the kingdom of Persia is modern-day Iran. And it isn't until Michael that comes to assist. Now, we realize that it says in Daniel 12 that Michael is the archangel that is specifically assigned to the Jewish people. And this particular passage, verse 14, says, to help you understand what shall happen to your people in the latter days. This latter days phrase is Acharit HaYamim. It literally means in the end of days. So here is a spiritual war that is detailed. The war is given to us. This battle is given to us to help us understand that this war that we're fighting, that Israel is fighting, the Iran and the Iran proxies, is all part of a spiritual war. So we're going to kind of understand that we're now at a place. We're at a place that Esther was also given the same warning. Esther was in Persia when this was given by Mordecai, and says to Esther, "Do you remain completely silent this time? Relief and deliverance of the Jews from arise from another place." And who knows whether or not you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Esther did not need to stand up for the Jewish people to protect them. The reality was that the Jewish people were going to be protected with or without her, just like the Jewish people would be protected with or without us. But we've been brought to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so now we're beginning to understand prophecy. We're getting to understand what's taking place. And now we start understanding our role. The rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of these different things, is actually prophetic in nature. In Jeremiah, it talks about a second Exodus. The first Exodus was the Exodus out of Egypt. And here the Lord lays out, he talks about, look, you remember the exodus we had out of Egypt. Verse 15 says, "But the sons of Israel will come from all the lands of the north and all the lands that he had driven them, into the lands that I gave to their fathers." So he's going back to the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the land of Israel today. Now, continuing on, it says, and I will send forth many fishermen, and they shall fish them. And after I will send many hunters, and they shall hunt for them from every mountain and every rock and every hill. You know, when you go fishing, you throw a rod or you cast a net and you draw Jewish people home. Well, now we're coming to the place that stage is over, and now we're starting to see the rise of hunters. This rise of hunters is the rise of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is being used by God to test, will we stand with the Jewish people, or are we becoming one of the hunters? And sadly, what we're finding out now, and especially if you're watching carefully, there's a lot of right-wing or conservative commentators that have gotten onto an anti-Semitic bent. They don't understand the spiritual war. They're looking at these things from a natural viewpoint, but there's a bigger thing playing out, and I'm going to continue on explaining. Listen, God isn't hiding his face from the sins of Israel. It says here, for my eyes are on all their ways. They're not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity hidden from my eyes. First, I will twice repay their iniquity and their sin. Why? Because they defiled my land. Notice here that the land that God has placed the Jewish people in, he calls it my land. And he calls this is his inheritance. And so now God can go ahead and deal with it any way that he wishes, but the sins of the Jewish people will be dealt with. It's not going to be dealt with by us, it'll be dealt with by God. But in this judgment that God has for the Jewish people, notice here that here it is that the judgment is so severe that the nations will go ahead and say, oh my goodness, what has happened? And then look what it says in verse 21. Behold, I will make them know. This time I will cause them to know my hand and my might. And they shall know that my name is Jehovah. They shall know his name is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is Adonai. And so now we're having this situation that God is going to use the Jewish people to show the nations who he is. So you have to understand that this is all the plan of God of restoring people from every nation, tribe, and tongue. So let's get right into today's news, because we just had a ruling come out. The Sanhedrin came out with this ruling that says, look, all Jews worldwide must come home. They have to come home immediately. And this was the actual quote. We are the rabbinic court of Jerusalem, and we have officially ruled that all Jews around the world have an obligation and a religious requirement right now to do whatever is in your power to come back to the home of Israel, to the land of Israel. And that is the mitzvah of Torah. It is a biblical requirement, and that is the mitzvah of today, especially because of what's happening around the world and the dangers that all the Jews all around the world are in all around the world. It is necessary now more than ever to come to Eretz Yisrael, and we, as the rabbinic court, have officially ruled that all Jews have to come home as soon as they can back to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. And so now you have a situation where now we're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism. We're seeing now that God is using the rise of to drive the Jewish people home. Now, most people don't realize that since the war has taken place, we're actually having a divergence going on. Because here is an article that we posted up on October 14th. This article goes through how 55,000 people left Israel, while only 55,400 people left Israel last year, compared to the 40,600 that left the year before. And so what has happened? You have to understand that Israelis, especially parents, are looking at the situation and they're quite hesitant to raise their kids right now in a wartime environment. Since 2020, the kids have only had one normal school year. It was February of 2020 that COVID hit. So the schools were closed in 2020, 2021. 2022 was a normal school year in Israel. 2023 is when the war started in Israel in October, and the war continues now. So that means in the past 5 years, they've only had one normal school year. So there is a dynamic going on that not everyone's coming home, but What we are seeing now is that groups around the world are protesting, and there's a global escalation of anti-Semitism that is taking place throughout the world. We had a situation just November 4th, so about 3 weeks ago, that there was massive anti-Israel protests. It was corresponding with the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. And the declaration was the call for the establishment of a homeland for the Jewish people that was set off in 1917. Next, we have a situation where we're having counter protests. We actually had a bunch of Christians stand up for Israel today in Amsterdam. And so this is an expression of support for the Jewish people. This is in response to the huge anti-Semitism that took place in Amsterdam about a week ago. Now, Stefan Boss is the one that wrote this article. He's originally from the Netherlands, and his father, who helped co-write the first article, is actually a resident of a suburb of Amsterdam. And what we reported this story almost within minutes of it happening because they were there. What was reported by the right-wing media and amongst some very prominent talk show, podcaster type people, is that Israel provoked this, that the Jewish people that were there for the soccer game provoked all of this, and they were robbing and looting, and that was so far from the truth. There is a spirit of anti-Semitism that right now is infiltrating. And while many of these podcasters call themselves Christians or cultural Christians, there is a dynamic of not understanding what the Word says and not understanding God's bigger plan and how they fit into the plan of God. So we're gonna jump into that a little bit. But we also had a situation in London that there was literally flyers all over a very prestigious London neighborhood that every Zionist needs to leave Britain or be slaughtered. So there was a situation that this is an article today. We have a lot of these things happening, and we just have a situation that the U.S. House formally condemns anti-Semitism in a passing of 388 to 21 that we just posted. So there is this battle going on, this spiritual war that's going on. And you have to understand that right now, in regards to the gospel, the Jewish people are enemies for your sake. As a pastor in Israel for 20 years, I had protests outside my house many, many times. But I was loving my enemies. This was my test. Would I be able to love them in the midst of their hatred for me? And I think that this is the love that is provoking them to jealousy. Now notice here, as regards to election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. That God has got this plan, and his plan is us intricately entwined in this. Notice here, now have been, for you, also then disbelieve God, so talking about us, that we did not believe God, but now have been shown through mercy through their disbelief. It's the Jewish people's disbelief that opened up the doors to the Gentiles. Even so, that these also have not believed now, so that through your mercy they may also obtain mercy. Notice here, through your mercy toward them. Though they're the enemies because of the gospel, they're in regards to the gospel, they're enemies to you. It's your mercy toward them that they will go ahead and obtain mercy. For God has shut up all in unbelief so that he might show mercy to all. So the plan of God is using Jews and Gentiles to go ahead and coordinate this mass plan of the harvest. We're connected to this great harvest, and right now we're in the days of the harvest. There are things happening now. This Israel test is being used by God to see, will we be blessed? Will we go ahead and carry this torch of saying we will stand with the Jewish people through thick and thin? Now, when I say this, that doesn't mean we're against anyone. God is not against the Palestinians. God is not against the Arabs. Just because we're for someone doesn't mean we're against anyone, because the reality is that God is for everyone. God is trying to redeem. His plan of salvation is open up to everyone, not only to the sons of Isaac, not only to the Jewish people, but to the sons of Ishmael, to the Arabs. And so how do we go ahead and promote this is to go ahead and just show love in the spite of how much hatred is going on. So listen, don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the this whole atmosphere and develop a root of hatred. The reality is that you need to loose yourself of any kind of hatred or loose yourself of any kind of bitterness and start praying into the plan of God. God has got a plan. God's got a plan for the Jewish people. God's got a plan for the Arabs. God's got a plan for your family. God's got a plan. And you start praying into those things. A revival's coming. The biggest move of God is already starting. Most people don't realize it, but hey, we'll see soon enough. Now, if you have a Christian website, we offer our news, our devotions. We give it away for free. If you would like to go ahead and grab our plugin, it's free. It doesn't cost anything. Syndicate our news. Go ahead and use our news services. This is how it kind of embeds into a site. This is a church that runs our news, completely sucks our news right into their website. There is a plan, a reason why we're doing this. I can't explain why. Maybe in the future I'll explain it, but it's imperative that if you have a Christian website and you would like to run our news. It's free. If you don't get our worthy briefs, we send out a daily devotion along with what's happening around the world. It's free. It does not cost anything. If you do not have our app, sign up for our app. Get our app. It's free. You can get it on Google Play. You can get it on Apple, the App Store. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. My hope is that you are understanding where we are prophetically, that we're at this place that God is using us in big ways, that God is using us to usher in His kingdom. And a big part of that is understanding how the Jewish people fit into this. So I'll go ahead and continue to do these kind of episodes. I've gotten quite a bit of feedback, so I'm going to go ahead and try to cover things regularly. So until Sunday night when I go ahead and publish another episode, have a great weekend. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's just been a delight. I had a wonderful time. I had 2 meals today at 2 different houses. it's Thanksgiving. It was great. But until next time, this is George Whitten reporting with Worthy News.